Richard Quest. He joins us from London. Richard.
Many thanks, Jim. Of course, there was no trading in the United States, so the initial financial reaction has had to come from overseas. Europe saw very sharp falls as the news came in from New York and Washington. That's been followed up overnight in the Far East. Asian markets are down between around 6 to 10%, 10% in the Hong Kong market. The worry, of course, is clearly what this will mean for the wider issue of the economy. Clearly, business will be seriously affected as Wall Street is paralysed. Simply those who can't even get to their offices to do business, let alone those who have actually been affected by the crashes. Overall, nobody can really say at this point the extent to the economic effect. We do know that the Fed is planning to pump money into the economy. That's designed not only to prevent a cash shortage, ordinary consumers who may just be taking larger sums out of the bank, but also to prevent any form of credit crunch, Jim.
All right, when you look at the markets, is there any way of telling how long-lived this might be, this steep drop that you see in Asia right now?
I think that one has to put this into two different categories. On the one hand, there is the market's reaction. That can unwind itself in a matter of days. That is simple panic. We've seen markets react before. 2 weeks later, you wonder what had happened. Much more serious is the effect to business confidence. Bearing in mind, the World Trade Center had over 435 tenants in those two buildings alone. They come from more than 26 countries around the globe. There were major financial institutions, Morgan Stanley, Keefe, Bruyette & Woods, Credit Suisse First Boston, just some of those who are actually in the buildings. Now, taking away from that and moving slightly further afield, you've got, of course, the collapse of number 7 World Trade Center. You've then got all the other buildings nearby where people simply won't be able to get to work. The ripple effects will start to be felt. And that's why it's vital that people like Paul O'Neill, the US Treasury Secretary, who's now leaving Japan and heading back to the United States, Alan Greenspan, the chairman of the Fed, who's at a bankers' meeting in Basel in Switzerland, and the SEC, are all coordinating at the moment, not only to send a message that they will provide the money necessary for corporate America to continue, but also to restore confidence in the market system.
All right, Richard Quest reporting to us there from London. Colleen.
All right, and of course, as we've been telling you all along, some of the rescue efforts still going on tonight, especially in New York City, and we've actually got some tape in just now that we want to show you of those night rescue operations in and around the area of the World Trade Center. Just backing it up there a little bit. Let's see if we can get it rolling again. You can see some of the areas that have been lit. We heard earlier from a report from CNN's Deborah Farrick, who was down in that area, that they do have dogs there. They've got cadaver dogs searching. Even that is being made difficult because there's so much dust on the ground. She was saying that even the dogs can't really do their work. So still a lot to sift through. There have been reports this evening of telephone calls, cell phone calls being made, possibly from the basement area of that complex. None of that's been confirmed, but of course rescue officials hoping and trying to see if there are people still alive. They want to be able to get them out. We heard earlier from the New York mayor that more than 300 firefighters they believe are missing and presumed dead, and dozens of police officers as well who were surrounding that building when the two towers essentially crumbled into dust. So you're looking at some pictures there in and around the World Trade Center of the night rescue operation still underway at this time.
And incredible pictures, because really that's our best look really at the destruction that we've seen thus far, because it was enveloped in clouds of dust for so long during the daylight hours, very inaccessible, but you can see the way that the buildings are simply gone. All you see are the shell.
Yeah, you see a few floors there, Jim, just a few, obviously badly burnt out.
But having worked there, and you know, CNN had its New York bureau in the World Trade Center when the network first started on the air 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago. And when I look at those pictures, you know, it's hard to believe. And as many people have noted on this day, there's a sense among the people in the United States that there has to be retribution for this. The death toll alone is going to be staggering. We've been warned about that. No one even knows, no one can even estimate. Although United States officials say there have been no credible claims of responsibility for Tuesday's attacks in New York City and Washington. And they remind everyone it's still too early to speculate about exactly who may be involved. Still, some U.S. intelligence officials are telling CNN there are good indications, that's their words, that people linked to Saudi exile Osama bin Laden might be responsible. As the World Trade Center burned furiously, smoke billowed above the Pentagon, and the White House was evacuated, one security expert declared, "This isn't an act of terrorism, this is an act of war." Noting there was no direct evidence, several experts pointed out that few terrorist organizations around the world were capable of mounting such an audacious attack. They mentioned only one man by name, a name repeated by U.S. officials for years.
There is not the slightest doubt that Osama bin Laden, his worldwide allies, and his sympathizers are planning further attacks against us. Despite progress against his networks, bin Laden's organization has contacts virtually worldwide, including in the United States, and he has stated unequivocally that all Americans are targets.
For almost a decade, Osama bin Laden has been accused or suspected of coordinating attacks on the United States, on U.S. troops in Saudi Arabia, on U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania, in the suicide mission against the USS Cole, at the World Trade Center in 1993, and the list goes on. Terrorism experts paint a picture of bin Laden as a Saudi-born revolutionary determined to end U.S. involvement in Saudi Arabia. In interviews, bin Laden has renewed his vow to bring jihad or holy war against the United States. Specifically, he said Washington had failed to get the message from bombings aimed at U.S. forces in Saudi Arabia.
We declared a jihad, a holy war, against the United States government because it is unjust, criminal, and tyrannical.
Terrorism analysts warned earlier this year Osama bin Laden was turning his attention to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, hoping to win armed converts and gain global political momentum out of the chaos of the collapsed peace process. Bin Laden's wealth, estimated by some at around $200 million, is seen as key to not only recruiting militant followers, but funding carefully planned and coordinated attacks. U.S. officials blame Osama bin Laden in the attacks on the U.S. embassies in Nairobi, Kenya, and Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, which they say were carefully timed to increase the dramatic effects of a simultaneous onslaught against U.S. interests.
Get the cameras out of here. Let's go. Get off now.
It is precisely the same strategy that appears to be at work in the financial and political centers of America in the latest attacks. U.S. officials assert that bin Laden initiated his terrorist network during the war in Afghanistan, later moved to training bases in Sudan, and is currently being sheltered by Afghanistan's ruling Taliban. The Taliban say they have been warned the U.S. will hold Afghanistan responsible for any attack on U.S. interests linked to bin Laden.
There are governments like Afghanistan which are engaged in the smuggling of heroin and the harboring of terrorists. Governments such as Afghanistan, I think, have to be considered criminal organizations.
Sanctions against Afghanistan are already in place. U.S. missile strikes hit bin Laden's training facilities there in 1998, but missed the 44-year-old leader of an organization he simply calls the base. Earlier this year, reporters who visited bin Laden in Afghanistan said he appeared to be in a race against time, a race to see who could strike first, the United States or Osama bin Laden. It may be weeks or months before those behind what is apparently the worst terrorist strikes in the history of the U.S. are known. What is certain is that Osama bin Laden is already high on the list of suspects. One Arab journalist says Osama bin Laden warned 3 weeks ago that he and his followers would carry out an unprecedented attack against the United States. He's joining us now. Abdul Bari Atwan, editor of the London-based Al-Quds newspaper. joining us from London. Tell us a little bit more about this warning. There have been many others, haven't there?
Well, actually, I believe this could be a work of consortium of many organizations, Islamic organizations, which they declared war against the United States. The anti-American feeling is very high now in the Middle East and the Muslim world because what's happening on the occupied territories, and many people accuse the United States of actually helping the Israeli and protecting them. So the groups like Bin Laden and other Islamic fundamentalists, actually, they would like to come out and say, look, we are targeting the United States. The United States is supporting the Muslim and Arab enemies, which is the Israeli, and we are taking revenge of what's happening. So we learned from sources that, they are really at work to hit American target. But nobody expected that this target will be in New York itself or in the Pentagon. So the place of the attacks was surprising to everybody.
Abdul Bari, Osama bin Laden has been said to be really trying to turn Afghanistan not only into what he would term a pure Islamic state, but into a base where there are people who would support exporting, if you will, his brand of Islamic revolution.
Well, actually, I interviewed Osama bin Laden on Afghanistan in November 1996, and I did see his camps and his followers there. The man is ruthless, and, he believes that he should declare war against the United States. And this kind of appeal, this kind of call actually appealed to many young Muslims all over the world. And he recently managed to recruit a lot of those highly educated Arabs who were even educated in the United States itself and some Western countries. So I'm not surprised if he is surrounded with experts in different fields. And we noticed that the attack against the American destroyer Cole in the seaport of Aden was highly sophisticated attack, highly sophisticated on the bombing, the information gathering, and the monitoring of the movement of the American warships. So I'm not surprised if those highly intelligent people, highly educated people actually were behind the planning of the attacks against the World Trade Center.
When people look at this and they see it in the narrow confines of one day, people saw Palestinians standing up and cheering these attacks in Nablus, in refugee camps in South Lebanon, where they've languished for half a century. When they look at that, on one hand, it creates a sense of anger. And there has to be a sense as well from some among the Arab world that this is not going to lead to an improvement in the situation, and certainly not a change in the U.S. position.
Jim, you are absolutely right, but we have to put into our consideration there are 300 million Arabs, and those people are very few who actually were dancing in the streets, whether in Nablus or in refugee camps in Lebanon. The Palestinians definitely will suffer because of these attacks, because they want the American involvement in the peace process to be revived. And they want the American to be the sponsor of the peace process and to intervene and put an end to the Israeli aggression against their people there. So we cannot say those people representing the Arabs, but we have to ask our questions. Why America is targeted? Why the American people are targeted? Definitely there is something wrong in the American foreign policies. So these wrongs has to be readdressed, has to be rectified, and we want more involvement from the United States on the Arab-Israeli conflict to revive the peace process, to put an end to the Israeli atrocities. Also, there are Palestinians killed in the West Bank and Gaza Strip every day by the Israeli tanks, by the Israeli missiles. So we have to understand the frustration of some people, but this doesn't mean that we should support any terrorist acts against innocent Americans in New York and Washington, anywhere in the world. It is a terrorist act. Everybody condemned in the Middle East.
Abdul Bari Atwan of Al-Quds, our thanks to you for being with us there. Colleen?
All right, Jim, thanks. I want to show you some tape again now that we're just getting in. We're just starting to get some nighttime footage rolling in of the efforts that are going on there. This is the rubble around the World Trade Center, and actually maybe I need to be corrected. That doesn't look like nighttime. Perhaps that's from earlier in the day. John, maybe you can just let me know for sure. Regardless, that is the rubble around the area of the World Trade Center. You can clearly see parts of building, all that dust that rained down, all the debris. In that debris, we saw earlier sheets of paper from the offices in there. Only a few floors of that building remaining standing. Still a fair bit of dust there. We saw in pictures from nighttime just a few minutes ago that a lot of that dust has settled. Rescue workers on the scene. And there you see